Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project Live. It's wonderful to have you here as always, and we look forward to bringing you another amazing interview today. We're going to be joined by Roberta Hughes shortly. We're going to talk about all things authenticity in leadership, but also how you can also show up as your authentic self and practice some mindfulness and bringing that genuine self to work every day, which whatever work environment you work in, there's going to be something in it for everyone today. So we're streaming out live right now on both LinkedIn and on Facebook. So if you've already joined us, please do let us know by popping something into the comments. Just let us know where you're joining in from. We'd love to hear from you. And you're going to have some opportunities coming forward where you're going to be able to ask some questions yourself. So you'll be able to pass some comments. You might have some very strong opinions about authenticity, and we welcome for you to share those opinions, and we can discuss them during the live stream. And you're going to have this golden opportunity to ask Roberta questions, and she's going to answer them live, and we'll have a great chat about those as well. So tell us where you're joining from, whether you're joining on LinkedIn or if you're joining on Facebook. Do tell us where you're joining from, what city, what country, whatever the case may be. You can also tell us what you're most excited about for today's live stream is also something that Roberta and I would love to know about. If you do have any specific questions, please, in the comment, it would be great if you can put just a little cue at the front of your question. And it'll just help Roberta and I to be able to tell the difference between what might be just a comment or something where you're sharing an opinion versus something that's a specific question that you would like us to address. And we're delighted to be able to help you with those questions as we go through today. Roberta's interview on the Leadership Project podcast was one of our most favoured interviews. It was absolutely wonderful. I had a wonderful response. Many downloads. We know that you all enjoyed it, and we're very happy that we're able to give you this opportunity today to ask your questions live of Roberta. So if you're joining us, here we go. We've got our first one joining now. We've got Marco is joining us from Northeast Victoria in Australia. So Marco, it's wonderful to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time. It's wonderful to see you joining us today and joining us via LinkedIn. So thank you very much for joining in. We look forward to bringing you some great content today and also giving you the opportunity to pass your views about authenticity and also to ask any questions that you might have of Roberta as we go through. As we get ready for our discussion today, I want to share a few updates with you about what's happening here at the Leadership Project. As usual, we have our normal weekly podcast interview out, and this week I'm really excited to bring you Corey Chadwick. Corey Chadwick is the CEO and founder of something called the Mental Gym, and he pushes us all to live our 10 under this banner of this thing called Live Your 10. And he really asks you some critical questions about, what are you living in your life today? Are you living a 6 or a 7? Or are you really pushing it to make sure you're getting the most out of your life? And he talks a lot about mental fitness. and how mental fitness is very different to mental health or therapy or other forms of things that you might go through. And the idea that you should be exercising your brain, your mental fitness every day, just like you would go to the gym to exercise your body. And it's a wonderful interview. Give me a little bit of license here. Please forgive me that it's a 1 hour and 30 minute interview, because there was so much rich content. I couldn't help myself but continue to double click and explore more and more from Corey. So that's our podcast interview for this week, Corey Chadwick. You're not going to regret listening to this one. It's absolutely wonderful. I'm also really excited to tell you that my book is now launched. So You're a Leader, Now What? The Proven Path to High Performance Leadership is now out. And I'm going to play a very short video for you today. For those that joined early onto the screen, you might have already seen this. For those that joined the launch party, you've also seen it. But I'd love to just quickly show you this advertisement. Faris Sadek, our video editor, put this together, and we're very proud of it. And I'll show you this, and then I'll jump back on screen. So there we have it. You're a Leader, Now What? The Proven Path to High Performance Leadership. You can get your copy on Amazon now, either as an ebook or as a paperback. And we would greatly appreciate it, not only if you purchased a copy and supported the show and supported me personally, but also if you could leave us an honest review on Amazon. The Amazon algorithm just loves, well, they love purchases clearly, but they love it when reviews start coming in, because it shows them that the book is popular, and then it gives them the license to go ahead and start showing it to more eyeballs. Now, to be clear, writing this book was never about making money. That's not what it's about. It's about making impact. And the more people that see the book, the more impact that we will be able to create. Got a couple of more joining in now and showing us where they're coming from. Jennifer Dunbar, an amazing transformative coach, is joining us from Singapore. It's always great to see you, Jen. Thank you, and congratulations on your latest certification from Coach Masters Academy. I saw that come through yesterday. Now at the advanced level as a professional certified coach. So congratulations, Jen. Well deserved. And if anyone's looking for an amazing coach that will give you a good, deep listening to and help you on your path, Jen is absolutely amazing. And we've got Irene joining us from Manila as well. So we're already getting quite an international audience today. We've got people from Australia, Singapore, from Manila, and I know for sure that there's going to be people there from the US. They're always joining in and watching the show as well. So great to see you all this morning. Please, if you do have some questions, do let us know. Pop those questions into the chat. Put the little Q in front so that we know that it's a question, and we look forward to getting to those questions as we go through our session today. So who are we joined by? Well, we're going to be joined today by Roberta Whitney Hughes. And Roberta was on the Leadership Project podcast, and I'm happy to say one of our most popular interviews. She really gave a level of depth around this topic of authenticity that was needed on our show, and it was a conversation that is needed because we all talk about authenticity. We say that one of the most admirable traits that we look for in our leaders is authenticity, but we don't always know what it means or where to begin. And that includes, how do we show up as our authentic self, as a leader or as a team member? How do we show up as our authentic self, and how do we know when we've got the right level of safety for us to do so? So without any further ado, I'd like to now introduce Roberta on stage. She is the founder of Peaceful Living and also the lead instructor at Peaceful Living TV. And Peaceful is a F-U-L-L, which is really important, that distinction there. It's about living a full life and a peaceful life. And she has an amazing following on Instagram. She does these daily lessons. You can subscribe to her service. I'll let her talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But it's an absolute joy to invite Roberta onto the stage now. So please, Roberta, please say hello to the audience and tell us a little bit more about your background and what led you to founding Peaceful Living in the first place.
Yes, so my name is Roberta Whitney Hughes, as you said, Mick, and I'm so thankful to be here on screen, and I wish I could see all of our listeners that are with us today as well. That visual is such a great way to connect in addition to the auditory, but I'm glad that you and I could see each other. I founded Peaceful Living in 2018 as an opportunity to bring awareness to the fact that we need more peace in our lives. I wanted to create a website and content that people could look forward to coming to feel relaxed, to feel joy, to feel calm, to feel inspired. And within the content, I have a blog, I have Livestream yoga videos, Livestream yoga and Pilates classes, and on-demand videos as well. And I have on-demand videos in mindfulness and meditation, and longer guided meditations for people who might be new to meditation and a little bit nervous to try it out.
Wonderful, Roberta. So, we are talking about authenticity today, so let's begin with that.
Yes.
And we talk about, everyone says, turn up as your authentic self, and they expect leaders to do that. That's one of the things that comes out all the time when we do surveys on what are you looking for in a leader. Authenticity is always on the list. Quite often, it's number one or number two on that list. What does authenticity mean to you, Roberta Hughes?
Authenticity for me means that you're showing up as who you are. You're connected to who you are, and you know who you are. Most of us are raised to learn, to educate ourselves, to train our brains, to have that mental fitness. But in our education system, we really are missing the opportunity to learn how to connect to ourselves, how to connect to our needs in a learning environment, how to connect to our needs in a work environment. And so when we simply go through education and then go into a workforce, I think the ability to be authentic is missing because we show up with all of these skills, but then ourselves, our personal lives are kind of separate from that. And authenticity in leadership means that you can bring the two together.
Yeah, that's great, Roberta. Thank you for sharing that. Now, yoga and mindfulness is a big part of you, of how you discovered all of this. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you discovered yoga in the first place?
Sure. I took my very first yoga class at the age of 19 in college, and it was a gift. It was the opportunity for me to take one class that was not connected to learning. It was movement and breathing, and my teacher was wonderful. She inspired me. We learned the names of the yoga poses, but we also had an experience that was so profound that when I would walk out of class and meet my roommate, she would comment on how relaxed I looked and how peaceful I looked. And I felt that way too. And after that class, I always felt more focused in the classes that came next. And I felt more able to perform and to do the work.
So what role I want to build this bridge from yoga and the mindfulness that comes with that to being authentic. What role do you think yoga plays in being connected to yourself first, to know yourself?
In a yoga practice, we are connecting to the breath, we're connecting to the body, and we're noticing how the mind is moving between thinking and being present for the movement and the breath. And with a yoga practice, you'll begin to notice and become more aware of when the mind wanders away. You'll become more aware of thoughts that come into the mind, the cluttering of the mind, the busyness of the mind. And once you have that awareness of where your thoughts like to go, yoga becomes the tool that anchors the brain in the present moment. So when you're taking a yoga class or when I'm teaching a yoga class, I'm continually reminding people to look for the breath, match the breath and the movement. When the mind is focused on breathing and movement, thoughts subside. So you have more clarity, you have more awareness of that present moment and how you really feel in that moment.
So, to unpack that a little bit more, so we're talking about decluttering the mind and being able to focus more. What would you say are the positive impacts that come from that as a person and as a leader?
As a person, the less cluttered our minds are, the more clear we are, the more relaxed we are, and the less reactive we are in our actions. So that's great for any relationship, whether it's a personal relationship or a leadership role. If a leader can learn to become more patient, more aware, more present for the people that are reporting to them, for the people who are showing up to help make the company grow, to do their jobs, that leadership will have a bigger impact on a person than if they just show up with their skill set and go to work and ask people to do their jobs. That authenticity brings a deeper connection to the people who are performing, to the people who are needing to show up and work hard, and it allows them to feel successful, and it allows a leader to be connected to the things that they're contributing.
So, then in terms of showing up as your authentic self, what does that look like? So, you've connected to yourself as the first part. Then let's say that you get into a team meeting or a one-on-one meeting. What does an authentic leader look like?
An authentic leader in a team meeting, for example, if they were having a bad day, something terrible had happened on their way to work, for example, and they were feeling that walking into the meeting, authenticity might mean having a little icebreaker and saying, I'm walking into this meeting from a place of upset, and I'm going to take just a few minutes. I'd like to check in to see how all of you are feeling, maybe allow the other people in the room to share what's happening with them. And that creates the context of community and togetherness rather than just walking into the meeting and starting the meeting right away from that place of upset, because that's going to show up in how you communicate and what you communicate to the team.
Yeah, that's really good, Roberta. I want to expand on that a little bit. One of the things that we talk a lot about here on the show is that every single person wants to feel like they matter. They want to feel individually and collectively like they matter. And when the leader is turning up with that focused mind, with that decluttered mind, that is something they can then do. So you and I are talking together now. Yes, there is an audience listening, but I feel like I matter to you right now because you're focused on me and you're clearly paying attention. You're listening attentively. So I feel like I matter. Tell me more about what you think this role of this kind of showing up with that decluttered mind and that focus in terms of how they then feel about it.
When you can let go of the clutter in your mind, it allows you to be present for the person or the people in front of you. It's the same as connecting to your breath or your body in a yoga practice. When you let the thoughts go, the focus comes to what you're asking your brain to focus on. So if you're in a meeting, if you're one on one with a person, if you're 1 to 5 on a person, looking them in the eye, listening, asking clarifying questions, all of these things are part of being decluttered and focused, and they create emotional safety. They create a sense of community. They create a sense of being seen and heard. And that's what people need to feel like they have the opportunity to share.
Okay, so I want to catch on to something you said there about letting go of thoughts. Now, I think all of us, many people have probably tried meditation that are listening on the show now. And I think all of us would agree that thoughts do pop into your head. But what do you mean by letting go of thoughts?
Letting go of thoughts means you have a choice. You understand thoughts are going to come into your brain, and When they do, you can either get sidetracked by them and let them pull your attention in another direction, or you can simply acknowledge, I was thinking, now I'm back to focusing on this person.
So I guess what you're trying to say there is don't fight against it, right? So it's like people, there's a kind of stereotypical thing of someone trying to meditate, for example, and they're sitting there and thoughts come into their head and they go, oh, I'm not doing it right. I'm not doing it right. I can't be doing it right because my mind's not clear. But that's not what we're talking about here. Where the thoughts come and go, oh, that's an interesting thought, and then letting it go because it's not what you should be doing. At that point, your focus is on something else.
Yes, and when you sit in meditation on your own, you can develop that awareness. You can notice how cluttered is your brain. And meditation is not about shutting the brain down or trying to get it to stop thinking. It's really about changing your relationship to those thoughts. So when they come up, acknowledge them. Some people like to say thank you and, acknowledge and let it go. I often guide people to imagine their thoughts like clouds drifting through a blue sky. So you see them, you're aware of them, but you're not going to follow them and pass along with them. You're going to let them pass through and bring your focus back to whatever your anchor is. We use anchors in meditation to anchor our awareness, and that practice can become useful in relationship with others as well. So in leadership situations, if you're practicing meditation from a place of I should stop thinking and you're trying to do it, in this harsh way, you'll probably feel more frustrated versus if you start practicing meditation as an opportunity to change your relationship to your thoughts, to your cluttered mind, then it might become more interesting and applicable to your leadership role.
Okay, that's great advice, Roberta. And I love this analogy that you're using about the clouds. It's clouds in the sky, and some of them are just going to pass through, and just, yep, that's fine. And just don't overthink it. And if you start overthinking it, that's when you will get frustrated, like you said. Mm-hmm. All right, another part of authenticity is being open and transparent. And with that can come a level of vulnerability. So being open with your team and sharing your thoughts, sharing how you feel, sharing yourself. Tell us more about the role of vulnerability and being open and transparent in being authentic as a leader.
That's a big one. It takes practice. You have to train it like you train a muscle to be able to show up with vulnerability and transparency. First, you need to understand your own emotions. There needs to be a way to practice that on your own so that you have that intuition and knowledge about yourself. These are the things that I tend to feel when I'm uncomfortable. These are the things I tend to feel when I feel comfortable and successful. Getting to know your scope of feelings and emotions gives you the ability to show up in a vulnerable way and in a transparent way that's not going to put you at risk for harm. And so I think sometimes with vulnerability, people think that they have to rip themselves wide open and show all of the things that they're feeling inside. But I believe vulnerability is moving from a place of compassion and empathy and understanding. When you connect to your emotions, knowing that others have similar emotions, maybe for different reasons, and different things stimulate those emotions, but knowing that we're all human beings feeling similar things in different circumstances allows you to be vulnerable and transparent in leadership and in communication.
Yeah, really good, Roberta. And I'll address one thing head on here is a lot of leaders think that being vulnerable is a sign of weakness and that admitting your shortcomings or admitting that you have emotions, etc., is some sign of weakness as a leader. But I'm here to tell you that it's not. It's a sign of strength. It's a sign of strength and trust that you can trust your team because you are being vulnerable with them. And if you're worried about, then they'll know I've got weaknesses. Well, the biggest thing I can share with you there is that's because you think they don't already know. And I can tell you that most everyone on a team, they already kind of know what the boss's strengths and weaknesses are. And when you're open about your strengths and weaknesses and you're vulnerable like that, it builds trust because they feel like, oh, good. My boss is a real human being, to use the words that you just used there. I'd like
and
to...
may I add something,
Yeah, please,
Nick?
Roberta. Yeah.
I think there's a fine line between vulnerability and complaining. And maybe that's where the idea of it being a weakness comes from, is that sometimes when we bring to attention what we're feeling, we're not coming from a place of emotional intelligence where we have done the work to really discover those emotions, to become aware of them, to understand them, and to be able to communicate them in a healthy way. That's the power of emotional intelligence. If we're simply showing up and complaining, like, I'm having a bad day, nothing's going right, and using that as an excuse to be a little more assertive or whatever the case might be, that's different than being vulnerable and transparent. That level of authenticity has to be encapsulated in the process for it to be effective.
A super valid point there as well, Roberta. And I think that comes down to the selection of language. So being open, transparent, and vulnerable is wonderful, but that's good advice. Be careful with the language. Make sure it doesn't sound like it's a complaint, because complaints don't help anyone. In fact, there's a movement. I don't know if I've shared this with you before, Roberta, in our discussions, but there's a movement called a complaint-free world. And a complaint-free world talks about, don't complain about things that you can't change, because that is just a waste of energy, because it's not going to change anyway. And don't complain about the things that you can change. Just get off your butt and go and change them, right? So complaining is an energy drainer, but open, transparent, and vulnerable communication in the right way builds trust. What's your reflection to that?
I completely agree. And in my yin yoga practices, I love for people to explore this concept exactly. When you are faced with something that is either within your control or out of your control, what is your response? What is your reaction? Are you more reactive or are you more receptive to the conditions that arise? And giving yourself the opportunity to explore in a place where it's only you and there really is no risk or harm to be done, you can learn a lot and develop a lot of self-awareness so that you can take that into all of the roles that you do in life.
I like that. So are you being reactive or are you being receptive? That's really good. And when we spoke about it, emotional intelligence, a few weeks ago, we then spoke about, well, how are you responding, not reacting to that emotion that's popped into you? How are you understanding it? You've spoken a lot already about awareness that comes with this. The more aware you are, the more you're then ready to respond appropriately and be receptive to what's going on around you. Really good. I want to explore something else now, Roberta. So when the leader is able to do this, they're able to be open, be transparent, be vulnerable, show up as their authentic self. What impact does that have then for their team?
I believe it creates a sense of emotional safety and community and trust. So, in that situation, with the container of trust and emotional safety, people are willing to share more freely. They're willing to be more vulnerable. They're willing to be more transparent. And that's where healthy communication comes into play. People can share without complaining. They can share from a place of what's working and not working, rather than worrying, if I say this, is my boss going to react to it?
All right, brilliant. So now you're creating the environment where they can show up as their authentic self. And now you're going to get the real story of what's going on with them. They're going to feel like they can...
Authenticity invites authenticity.
Oh, I love that. That's the quote of the day today. Authenticity invites authenticity. And then you're going to find out what's really going on. What's going on with them personally, what's going on in the business. They're not going to be frightened. We spoke a lot about psychological safety a few weeks ago with Stephen Shedleski. I don't know if Shed's watching today, quite often does watch the show, but providing that environment, that's when you're going to get to the truth of what's really going on. to know people will feel safe that they can stick up their hand and ask for help. They'll feel safe to stick up their hand and say, I'm struggling with this right now, or I'm struggling with something at home. So yeah, absolutely wonderful. Now let's going to jump now across to some of the questions that we're getting, Roberta. So one more call out to the audience, though, as we do, that if you do have some questions, please do pop them into the chat. Also, we're seeing some great comments come through as well, and we're going to share some of those comments as we go through. But if you do have some questions, please do put them through. Try to put a Q on front of the question so we'll know what's a question versus a comment, and then we'll work through it. So I'm going to go through the first one now. We'll start with Irene. What do leaders usually get wrong about authenticity? So they get told that they should be authentic, but what are some of the missteps that a leader might make with that?
I think the missteps are trying to understand authenticity from your brain versus from your experience of it. You can read about authenticity, but until you dive into practices that help you cultivate self-awareness, that help you establish emotional intelligence, that help you understand your own emotions and how you communicate and either receive or react to conditions, until you experience those things at a level where you can understand them, it's really challenging to say, I'm showing up as my authentic self. You have to get to know yourself. You have to have that level of understanding, self-awareness, and self-acceptance.
So I'm going to summarize that as don't skip the point about self-awareness. Start with yourself, connect to yourself, understand yourself, and then you can start being authentic and showing up as your authentic self. If you skip that step, you might show up as a version of your authentic self that you think other people want to see, which is different.
Right.
Thoughts?
And I would say, you're on the right track if it feels risky. Because authenticity feels risky.
Oh, that's another powerful one. You're on the right track if it feels a little bit risky. And I'm going to jump to a comment that we've had from Jen that's similar to that, which is stepping out of your comfort zone to move forward, right? So just on the edge of your comfort zone is where great things happen. If you stay inside your comfort zone at all times, it's just a bit, more of the same. But on the edge of your comfort zone is where great things happen. If you go too far beyond, then it can get, that's when you can actually go the other way, and maybe stress can start dominating instead of authenticity. That's probably a good segue, because I was planning to ask you this anyway. You speak a lot about stress in your work, and you talk about redefining your relationships with stress, or in some cases I've heard you say making friends with stress, making stress an ally, or making stress work for you. Tell us more about that.
So stress isn't always a bad thing. Stress is a part of life. And we spoke a little bit earlier about if you try to make something go away, it usually gains more power. And stress is definitely one of those things. If you try to push it away, to push away the things that create stress in your life, they'll get bigger and ask for more attention and become a bigger burden. Making friends with stress is the opportunity to learn what things create a stress response for you. So it might be showing up for a meeting with your colleagues. Maybe that's a stressful situation. It might be going and traveling for business and giving presentations. It might be just getting from home to work each day if you have a big transition from your home life to your work life. What are the things that bring stress responses up for you? And then what are your stress responses? Do you get nervous, jittery hands, maybe sweaty palms? Does your heart start to race? Do you start to speak faster? We all have things that we do when we're stressed out. So when you get to know, number one, what your stressors are, and then number two, what your stress responses are, then you have the ability to change. You can start creating your own barometer. And again, I love to do this through the practice of yoga. We put stress on the body on purpose. We notice those stress responses, and then there's room to play with it. What happens if you push deeper? What happens if you back off? What happens if you sit right in that pocket? Um, Training tools that help you experience it in a healthy way so that you can create that barometer and ability to regulate it in life's conditions.
Yeah, really good, Roberta. So the things that I'm picking up there, coming back to self-awareness again, and whether it be stress
Yes.
or other emotions, having the ability to understand what your emotional triggers are or what your stressors are in the case
Mm-hmm.
of stress. I like what you said about if you overthink it, it then gives it oxygen and maybe makes it bigger than what it really needs to be. And then,
Mm-hmm.
secondly, pushing or thirdly, pushing towards that optimal performance of how much of that little stress. There's a thing called the Yerkes Dodson curve. I'll have to look it up and maybe put it in the show notes, or anyone from my team, if you're watching, you can put it in the chat. There's a thing called the Yerkes Dodson curve, which shows you the optimal performance is actually just outside that comfort zone, like Jen said before, where that little bit of stress, but where stress is working for you, not against you. And that's the same with any emotion. Noticing and naming the emotion. Why am I feeling this emotion? Why am I feeling this emotion now? And how can I get it to work for me instead of against me? So that's wonderful advice there, Roberta. I think there's something in that for everyone. I want to go to another comment from Jen here as well. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this last word here. Releasing vulnerability shows strength, courage, and also ownership. So when you're vulnerable, it's building a greater level of ownership of what's going on with you or what's going on with the team. What's your reflections there, Roberta?
I love this, especially in relationships and working relationships, especially learning to acknowledge what is yours and what is someone else's. It gives a lot of space and grace for people to share more freely. So when you take ownership for your own emotions, your own feelings, your own thoughts, and understand that everybody in the room has their own set of those things as well, it loosens up the ability for conflict because you can come in a more authentic role to have a conversation about. My mind just went to another thought. um,
That happens, Roberta, but that's okay.
it
We're
does.
doing
It
do it
happens
live
to
on.
all of us.
There we go.
I was going back to the word ownership, and my mind went on to thinking when you can own and be responsible for the things that are coming into your space or the things that you're bringing into the space, it gives more freedom to the people that are in the room with you and that are in a conversation with you. If you come in unaware of what part you're responsible for, and that's on an emotional level, on a vulnerability level, on an authenticity level, if you're unaware of what you're bringing into the room, it can create a big impression on the people and shift the energy into a place that is not positive.
There's two sides of that coin. That's really good, Roberta. And I hadn't thought of it in these terms until you just said it. The openness, the vulnerability builds that ownership of the emotion. It builds ownership of the problem. But I think the flip side of the coin is equally powerful that you're bringing up. A lack of vulnerability, a lack of openness, a lack of transparency, people notice it. And that's when they feel like, oh, okay, no, something's amiss here. We know that there's a problem right now and the boss is not telling us about it. And
Yes.
they'll start drawing their own conclusions in a vacuum of information. People start drawing their own conclusions. In a vacuum of
Yes.
information, people start drawing their own conclusions. So, as a leader, be the one that's open, transparent, and vulnerable and fill that vacuum with the information that they need to know. Otherwise, they will just start drawing their own conclusions, and those conclusions may be far worse than the actual reality of the situation. Any thoughts on that, Roberta?
Yes. The word that came to mind is assumption. And when people start making assumptions, the ability to interact, the ability to relate, the ability to communicate is obsolete because everyone's in their own brain thinking their own thing and they're probably worst case scenario, and that storyline is getting bigger and bigger, and then nobody is present and working together.
Oh, well said. Yeah, really brilliant, Roberta. And now no one's mindful because they're all off drawing their own conclusions and their own assumptions about what is going on. Because I think the term is the elephant in the room. No one's talking about the elephant in the room, so everyone in their head is drawing a picture of a different elephant. Really, really powerful stuff. I want to go to another question from Jen. We're getting some absolute nuggets of gold here from Jen this week. This is brilliant. But what happens when you're in an environment or a culture that doesn't welcome authenticity? I want to start with a different question and warm up to that one. How do you know? How do you know if you're in an environment that welcomes authenticity? Let's start with that.
That was kind of my question. I think authenticity is something that we're aware of, but it's not something that we willingly bring to the table. It's almost like the secret conversation, but I feel like it's starting to get more traction and a bigger voice, and that there really is a desire for people to have authenticity in leadership. Jen's question sparks the thought of what we were just talking about, that there is a desire for it to be there, and for whatever reason the person is feeling that it's unwelcome. Is that the truth? Have they asked a question? Have they taken the risk to see if things could be different? Have they tried opening up a conversation about authenticity and what that might feel like and look like in their workplace or in their meeting or in that one moment that they're in? So my first question would be, why does it feel like authenticity is unwelcome?
We had a question from Faris that came in that built onto it. His was the same. How do you know if you're in that? And what I'm hearing from you there is dip your toe in the water and test the waters. Try some authenticity and see whether it's welcomed and what kind of reaction that you get. So I think that's a good start to that. And then building back to Jen's question, then you would know, right? So depending on what kind of response that you get. The conversation that we had with Shed the other week ago, again, Stephen Shedleski, about culture and about the behavior that gets rewarded, the behavior that gets tolerated, the behavior that doesn't get tolerated. These are what then sets the scene for whether people feel safe to show up as their authentic self. So if I build the two on, then we'll go with Faris. How do I know if I'm in the culture? Well, dip your toe in the water, show up as your authentic self, share a few things. Then to Jen's question, then if you get a very negative response, something that you didn't expect, well, then you might know that you need to do something else. And my advice there, Jen, would be to try and do something about it first. Don't give up. So having those, I was going to say fearless, but it's not fearless because it's actually fearful. Having those candorous conversations with your boss to say, well, I wasn't expecting that response when I shared this. Can we discuss that? And having that discussion, because it might be a point of self-awareness for them where they have no idea that they have not created an environment where people can show up with authenticity. So give them a chance, I would say. Give them that feedback.
Yeah. And learn to advocate for your wants and needs in any environment that you're in. And that is risky, and it will feel like a big risk is being taken, but that's when you know you're being authentic. And advocating for yourself is important, and having the ability to do that and finding the words to do that. We never can choose how those words will be received, but we can do our best to communicate in an authentic way.
Yeah, really good. Advocate for yourself and speak up about those needs with some level of clarity. Really good, Roberta. And then see where you go. If nothing changes, Jen, eventually you get to the point where you know what, this is not the team I want to be involved in. And you either shift to a different team in your same organization, or you start questioning whether you'd be better somewhere else, to be honest. And that's not a reflection of you. That's a reflection of the people that are not providing you with that environment. And we're seeing a lot of that with the great resignation at the moment. People that are saying, you know what, I don't have to put up with a toxic culture. I'm very welcome somewhere else. Okay. All right, let's go to Gerald's question here. What is your number one tip for managing stress at work or at home?
Breathing is the number one thing that you can do. Your breath is with you wherever you go. At work, if you need a moment, find a place in your work environment that feels like respite to you. Maybe it's just walking outside, looking at a tree, or being in the grass, or maybe there's a quiet spot in the office or a quiet room that doesn't get used very often. So if you can find a place to remove yourself to, set a timer for 1 to 2 minutes. That way you know you're not over you're not taking too much time, you're not disappearing for too long, but you're giving yourself just enough time to pause, take a couple of slow, deep breaths, reset your attention, and then walk back into what you need to do. And at home, carving out a place in your home that you have for a mindfulness practice. I use my closet. So people know in my home that when I'm in the closet with the door closed, that's my mindfulness practice. I'm doing what I need to do to rejuvenate and be ready to do the next thing. So I've worked a lot with people who have busy homes and busy families, and they might have a little corner in their home, but they set it up with a little rug or something special that it's just for them, a book that they love to read. So creating a quiet space for yourself at home, and then finding a place of respite at work where you can just be with your breath.
That's brilliant. I love that on so many levels, Roberta. I'm going to share with you those things. First of all, many of us are in a work from home environment. So the blend between work and life has blurred so much in the last 2 years. Crazy. The boundaries have changed. If you haven't been disciplined, there are no boundaries anymore. It's just completely blended. So I love that your advice would help people that are in that situation right now. The second thing, the practice itself, the breath, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But the third thing that I love so much is that your family know that that's your space. So if they see you go into that space, they know, okay, Roberta needs some time right now. And the fact that you've openly communicated that with them, that is golden advice there right now. Don't just go off and do your own thing and take a few deep breaths. The fact that you tell your family, this is what I do. This is what I do, and that's my time. I think that's super powerful. Now, I want to come back to the breath thing. I want to add something for Gerald to add some science to it beyond what Roberta and I know works. This is rooted in psychology and biology. So when you take those deep breaths, right? So there's three major centers of the brain, if you like. There is the root brain, which is responsible for fight, flight, and freeze. And if you're in a highly charged emotional state, taking a few deep breaths is proven to get you out of that root brain and into your limbic brain. And the limbic brain is responsible for processing emotion and making decisions. To take it a step further, if you then take the self-awareness steps that Roberta spoke about earlier in the interview, where you notice and name those emotions, that is what takes you to the prefrontal cortex. And now you're miles away from that root brain where you might have done something erratic that you regret later under the stress of the situation. So deep breathing works, noticing and naming the emotion, and the self-awareness that Roberta was talking about. Why this emotion? Why this emotion now? What was the emotional trigger that led me to that? And we've got Gerald thanking us for the insights and knowledge there, Roberta. So thank you so much for that.
Yes. And I'll also add, Mick, with breathing, it activates and stimulates your vagus nerve. And your vagus nerve is the nerve that helps the parasympathetic nervous system move into action. So when your stress level is high and you're in that fight or flight for whatever reason, you want to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system to bring yourself to a place of calm and relaxation. So belly breathing is very impactful. When the breath moves into the belly and the belly can be soft instead of tight, it tells your brain that all is well, and it helps your nervous system settle down.
Very good. That's a lovely way to conclude that advice through to Gerald. So thank you so much for that. And that draws us to a close now, Roberta. Thank you so much for your time today. There's been so many nuggets of gold. Thank you to everyone in the audience that asked questions along the way, particularly Jen Dunbar. Both her comments and questions were really on the mark. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jen. And once again, congratulations on your advanced certification that came through yesterday. An amazing coach for everyone in the audience. So thank you, Jen, for joining us today and bringing a lot of content. And thank you, Roberta, for your time. It's in the evening for your time over there, Mountain Time. Greatly appreciate your time today and for sharing your nuggets of gold. I want to tell the audience something that you and I are working on, with your permission, that we are going to look to do more work with Roberta going forward. So as we expand the Leadership Project Academy, we'll be looking at a partnership with Roberta around bringing some of her material and her guidance into something that will be an offering as part of the Leadership Project Academy into the future. So thank you so much, Roberta. It's been an absolute delight having you with us today, and we're getting some great congratulations coming through. We've got Joanne goes on, powerful sharing today. We've got Marco in Australia also thanking. So, we've got another one here, Tracy, as well. Great to see you, Tracy, as well. I only caught the second part of the session, but what I saw was very insightful. So there will be a recording, Tracy, if you want to catch the first half, and it's wonderful to see you here today as well. So thank you, Roberta. Thank you so much. I'll leave you to say goodbye to the audience, and then we've got a few final Leadership Project messages to leave with everyone as well.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us and for listening, for your wonderful questions. It allows us to open up conversations and share from a place that is going to inspire healthy leadership and authentic leadership.
Brilliant. Thank you, Roberta. So as mentioned, we've got a few other announcements to make. We are now taking applications for our next cohort of our flagship program, which is the Gateway to High Performance Leadership. The next intake will be starting in June, and we would love it if you would send us through your details and take a discovery call with us. So you can contact Joanne, goes on, we'll get her email address into the comments. You can contact Joanne and take a discovery call, and we can discuss with you where you're at in your leadership journey and whether our Gateway program would be a good fit for you, whether you're a good fit for the program and whether the program is a good fit for you. So we'd love to hear from you if that is of interest to you. I'd also like to share again that my new book is out. Very excited to share share the book with the world. It is available on Amazon as both a ebook and also a paperback, and we'll show that little promo that Faris put together again in a moment. Please do get your copy. We'd greatly appreciate if you do leave us an honest review on Amazon as well. With that, very pleased to tell you it hit #1 bestseller in 6 different categories in Amazon. We want to maintain that position for as long as we can. So if you haven't got your copy yet, please do get it, and please do leave us that honest review. We would greatly appreciate it. And then the final thing is to tell you that we have a different live stream next week. There's something very particular to note here, is that we've got Richard Newman joining us from Body Talk UK. And he's an expert on communication and communicating with gravitas. We're talking about a guy here that went to Nepal to teach Tibetan monks how to speak English, and there was no common communication barrier at all, no common language that they could work with at all. So you've got to hear this guy, and he really gets you to understand what gravitas really means, about the importance of body language, of facial expressions, all of these things. And the thing I want to point out to you, because he is in the UK, it's going to be a different time. So for people in Asia, it's going to be in your evening. For people in Europe, it's going to be in your afternoon. And for people in the US, it's going to be in your morning. So it's quite different compared to our normal time slot. Still getting more comments through. Josiah, so great to see you. Thank you so much for your support. You're one of the people that made the book successful. He works with an organization called SPS. And those people that are in the audience that you think you've got a book in you, contact Josiah, or I can put you in contact with Josiah. These guys are absolutely amazing. Huge hint here, Jennifer Dunbar. If you think you've got a book inside you, Jennifer Dunbar, get in contact with SPS, because I know that you've got a wonderful book inside you, Jennifer Dunbar. Have I been clear on that? I think so. All right, so thank you for your support, Josiah. So that's it for today. Thank you so much. We're going to show you that promo again for the book, and then our usual closeout as well. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been absolutely wonderful to have you here today.